Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu analysis for today. But before we go into these articles, an important announcement. As most of you already know, Byjus Exam Prep IAS is now on Telegram as well. All that you have to do is scan this code and you will be taken to the Telegram channel of Byjus IAS. In this channel, you will get all the latest updates about the current affair videos and the postings that take place on the Byjus Exam Prep YouTube channel and on the Byjus Exam Prep app. The link to join this Telegram group is also given in the description of the video, so do use this and join in large numbers. Now let's come back to the Hindu newspaper for today. The first article here is about how the Indian government, as per the author here, is not focusing a lot on the environment and is actually giving more preference to GDP, economy, development, infrastructure, which in the long run would not really be great. The author here has presented a point of view which says that the government of India should rather focus on sustainable development rather than building infrastructure, big dams, bridges, etc., undertaking mining of minerals. Rather than that, we should focus more on sustainable activities. Rather than that, we should focus on ensuring that people don't have to be displaced from their places because the environmental implication in the long run will be very, very bad. The author says that 1970s and 80s was an era where collectively as a society we were much more aware about the environmental implications of development. We saw a lot of environmental movements in 70s and 80s, be it the Chipko movement, the Silent Valley Park, the Narmada Bachao Andolan, so on and so forth. The government of the day had also responded by passing a number of laws in 1970s and 80s, be it the Environmental Protection Act, be it the Wildlife Protection Act, so on and so forth. However, what we have seen in the past couple of decades is neither the society talking a lot about environment, neither the government doing its bit. Mind you, this is what the author is saying. I might or might not agree with that, but we are just trying to interpret what the author has written in this article. He says that Niti Aayog in multiple reports has pointed out towards the environmental implications of this ongoing development. Niti Aayog recently said that 60 crore people in India face high to extreme water stress, with nearly 70% of the water being contaminated. India, as you know, has much lower level of water in our grounds as compared to what we require because of the high population that we have. ISRO, in fact, has even given a report about land degradation and desertification, as they have noticed with the help of their satellites. Over 30% of our land is turning into desert at a very, very fast pace. Not just this, as compared to other nations across the world, the average levels of land productivity are also very, very low. So the reason why we actually have a lot of production is because we have a lot of land. But per area or per square kilometer or per hectare production of a land in India is very, very low. That may be because in the green revolution there was an indiscriminate use of fertilizers, manures, too much water was put, and that is why now we are seeing the harmful impact of this. He is saying that pumping of artificial fertilizers, because these fertilizers are given from the government side at a subsidized price, giving too much water to the plant because the farmers don't have to pay for that. All of that has led to decline in the agricultural productivity as well. He has also blamed the World Bank for the same. He has said that a lot of infrastructure projects in India and other developing nations are funded by the World Bank. In result, these projects are the ones that forcefully lead to displacement of the Adivasis, displacement of the tribal population whenever the government decides to build a dam or to build any infrastructure. In fact, the World Bank itself said that India is losing 5.5% or in fact 5.7% of its GDP due to environmental damage. Now he says that while the World Bank has pointed this out, but the fact is that the World Bank also has to take the blame for that. The author says that the politicians are ignoring all these signs and their focus is only on the GDP growth. This can be seen from the budget also. In 2022-23, that is the latest budget, the budget given for highways was 40 times greater as compared to budget for Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Now this is where I would like to differ slightly. I don't think you can compare the budgets given to the two ministries here. For highways, obviously it's a capital expenditure, so you would obviously have to give it much higher budget. For Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they are more of raising awareness. They are more about creating funds to ensure that our environment remains healthful. But you can't really compare the budget of the two ministries, so I personally would not like to agree with this point. The author says that 1991 reforms were the beginning of this change in India, where the government started focusing a lot more on GDP because a lot of foreign companies, a lot of foreign investment came into India. Most of them focus on mining our natural material and exporting it. This led to a change in the lifestyle of the local Adivasi population because of forest dwellers, people living in the forest, tribals, Adivasi were displaced in large numbers. In fact, the irony, as per the author, is the government's so talked about scheme, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, even that is harmful to the environment. Atmanirbhar Bharat, for example, says that coal should be mined in India rather than bringing it from outside. So even when you're undertaking coal mining, you're actually displacing the Adivasi population, which is against the entire concept of living in harmony. The Lancet Journal says that extreme temperatures in India have been responsible for close to 7.5 lakh deaths in the country. Even then, the Action Climate Plan got just 30 crore rupees from this budget. So, in the first half of this article, the author has been pointing out towards the misplaced priorities of the government. He says that, however, the local people in many parts of the country have found out certain alternative solutions. He gives an example like 5,000 Dalit women farmers in the Deccan Development Society have been using traditional seed diversity that provides full food security and they don't use fertilizers. We also have thousands of handloom weavers in Kutch area that use the organic Kala cotton and mix their traditional skills with the new skills. These examples can be found out in many parts of the country, and as per the author, the government should actually give a push to them. Such measures, however, will only be successful if there is an awakening in the society. He says that the reason why 1970s and 80s saw a lot of new laws being introduced was because the people were more aware about their rights. The people were more concerned about their environment in the long run. This is not happening right now, and the people of the society must realize that the change will only begin from their end. Now, as I said, this particular article has mostly been written in a very pessimistic tone, pointing out towards the government's fault, saying that the government is not realizing the challenges in the future. So, just to even it out, I would like to actually give examples of a few initiatives that the government has taken in terms of environment and how the government is trying to ensure that we have a safe environment in the future. Now, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change at the end of every year publish their own report card and tell how much money have they spent where and what have been their achievements. These are some of the achievements that the ministry had pointed out by itself at the end of 2021. They talked about the progress made in Sustainable Development Goals 12, 13, 15. Goal number 13 specifically is about climate action. So they talked about the progress that has been made to counter the impact of climate change. It also talks about implementing of Nagar Van Yojana. It also talks about the strengthening of plastic rule management, so on and so forth. Also, one of the other silver linings that the author has ignored is India's push towards solar energy. In order to reduce our dependence on coal, the Indian government has been making leaps and bounds of progress when it comes to solar energy. So much so that India is now the world's fourth largest producer of solar energy across the world. India's share of renewable energy has been increasing at a very, very rapid pace. In fact, India is one of the only few countries that is on path to actually achieve its INDC targets when it comes to renewable energy. China is also making a lot of progress in this regard, but if you can actually see, India is also making fair bit of progress when it comes to solar energy specifically. As I said, we are now the fourth largest producer of solar energy in the world by 2021. First is China, then there is US, Japan, and then there is India. So that progress has been ignored by the author in this article. The next article that we have here is about the CSIR. Now, it's no surprise that it is actually written by a former Director General of the CSIR, that is Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. In this article, he talks about the contribution that CSIR has made to India's development and how without CSIR, India would not have been the country that we are today. He says that if you go back to India's independence, 1947, India's GDP was very, very low. There were huge problems that India was facing. Not enough food grains. We had a problem of uneducated people. We did not have proper democracy in the country. Our industries and trade was nowhere to be found. In all these challenges, the one ray of hope was the CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, that came into being in 1942. This is the premier research and development agency of the government of India. They are given the responsibility to research and develop new ideas to solve problems that the nation is facing. In this article, he gives a lot of examples of what CSIR has done for India, and we'll discuss some of them. He says that the CSIR was given the responsibility to set up national laboratories for research. CSIR in fact played a major role in establishment of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. This was the institute where Homi Jahangir Baba actually worked for nuclear energy prospects of the country. He said that it was CSIR only that formed a committee under Meghnad Saha to ensure which kind of calendar system should be used in India, because there were various calendar systems at that point of time. Not just this, some of the most important contributions of CSIR can be seen in the things that we see in day-to-day life of India today. For example, when you go and vote, after you have voted, there is an ink mark that is put on your fingernail so that it is clear who has already voted. And if you see, that ink cannot be removed by water or by even washing it. That ink was actually invention of CSIR. CSIR's National Physical Laboratory actually developed this ink out of silver nitrate to produce finger markings. It has been so successful that it is used even today, and that ink is even exported to many countries across the world. Then, the development of India's leather industry is also just because of the CSIR. In 1970s, the leather industry only had 25,000 workers. But then the government of India decided to ban the export of raw skins and decided to give a push to leather industry in India only. And then it was CSIR who actually researched about leather, how to make the best quality leather, and how can we actually replace the imported leather within India. Because of CSIR activities, now leather industry has close to 45 lakh workers that are working in the country. CSIR for that purpose in fact set up the CSIR Central Leather Research Institute to develop technologies for finished leather products. Not just that, the CSIR labs also trained people to work in the leather industry. As a result of this, India right now exports a lot of leather throughout the entire world. We have also seen the CSIR's mark in many other inventions across the country. The Green Revolution, which led to India becoming a food sufficient nation, actually was given push by the CSIR through its technology and innovation. Not just this, India today is called the pharmaceutical factory of the entire world. The generic medicines spread across the world are actually manufactured in India. That is also because of the CSIR's activities in this field. The CSIR also worked for agriculture. The CSIR set up labs such as Hindustan Insecticides Limited and Hindustan Organics Chemical Limited that actually led to all this research in the field of agricultural fertilizers. CSIR also worked for anti-HIV drugs in their labs, and they worked to develop indigenously Swaraj tractors that led to formation of a company called Punjab Tractors Limited 1970. These are just a few of the many things that CSIR has actually done for the country in the past. CSIR also played a major role in making India the largest producer of milk in the entire world. They successfully developed technology to convert buffalo milk into powder so that it can be used as milk powder and can be transported easily and has a much larger shelf life. They were also responsible for cultivation of lavender in Jammu and Kashmir, which led to India's Purple Revolution. Again, the list of achievements of CSIR is very long. The article just mentions a few of those. Now, whatever the article actually mentioned is mostly the achievements of CSIR many decades ago. So what I want to do here is first discuss with you the structure of CSIR, and second also give you examples of some of the recent development that CSIR has done for India. CSIR, as you know, is the largest research and development organization in the country, and the president of CSIR ex officio is the Prime Minister. So CSIR is headed by the Prime Minister. The Vice President of CSIR is the Union Minister of Science and Technology. CSIR gets its funding from the Ministry of Science and Technology. They have set up many labs across the country to research on different fields. Let me give you some of the latest examples of CSIR's contribution to India. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the country, you would remember CSIR was the one that was continuously giving press briefings. They were the ones who were actually working on how to stop the spread of pandemic. In that regard, they actually made a lot of discoveries in the field of plasma therapy. They also helped with the production of personal protective equipment, that is the PPE kits, surveillance, how to actually ensure that we can understand who is getting positive, who is not getting positive, so on and so forth. In terms of defense also, they have developed head-up display, especially for the Tejas aircraft. It helps the pilots in flying the aircraft, especially when they are aiming for the weapons. They have also invented solar tree. As you know, solar tree is a formation of solar panels so that it does not require a lot of land specifically for the solar panels to be spread out. India's first lithium ion battery fabrication facility was also started by CSIR. In fact, under the Shear scanner, the CSIR has also developed technology to detect the milk adulteration levels. Milk adulteration has long been one of the most important problems that the Indian society is facing. Again, these are just some of the examples of the amazing groundbreaking work that CSIR has done for the country's development. The next article that we have is again from the field of science and technology only. The author here, who is a professor at JNU, says that India does not spend enough on research and development. He says that the research and development field has a lot of potential with the Indian minds working on it, but because they don't have enough budget, we see that the country is lacking on many important areas. For example, he says that India spends only about 0.7% of its GDP on research and development. This has to go up to at least 4%. If you look at some of those countries around the world which are considered to be technologically advanced, like Israel, South Korea, they continuously spend 5% of their GDP just on research and development. So we have a long way to go and match that number. However, just increasing the budget is not the solution to the entire problem. This is just the first part. He says that apart from increasing the budget, we should also focus that the budget be used for building physical infrastructure. See, whenever you see the world rankings of universities across the world, you'd always see US, UK, European universities coming at the top, while the Indian university like IIT, IISc not really being at the top layer. It is not because the brains are not there. It is not because we don't have the capacity. It's mostly because the labs and the equipments that those universities have are much more advanced as compared to what we have. So lack of intellectual infrastructure to actually conduct experiments still remains a big roadblock in the country. So number one, increased budget should be used for establishing better infrastructure. Secondly, the author says that we should also establish proper procedures of how to collaborate with the global universities, the global scientists. See, research and development is all about collaboration. Yes, you can alone also invent a lot of things, but when multiple nations work together, when multiple minds work together, obviously the chances of arriving at a solution are much better as compared to earlier. And that is where there should be proper procedures set in place of how to borrow best practices from abroad. The government has to involve IT companies also here to ensure that we have a proper infrastructure in place to collaborate across the world. Thirdly, he says that apart from increasing the budget, setting up infrastructure, the other problem is that science is not really open to the common people. He says that, for example, CSIR conducts a research, or for example, Indian government's research and lab technology has identified something new. We should actually give that information to the private sector, to the entrepreneurs who want to use this technology to actually invent something new. So government should actually share its technology, share its understanding, share all its learning with the private sector, help the entrepreneurs to actually use these ideas. Over here, I would like to give you an example which the author has not mentioned. You all may have seen how UPI has actually increased its reach in India just in a few years. This is a very, very important example. UPI technology was actually made by NPCI, the National Payment Corporation of India, which is a government of India agency. But they were happy to actually give it to all these platforms like the Phone Pay, Paytm, Google Pay, etc., that have built their platforms on the UPI technology. And you see the result is that UPI has spread so far across the country that right now, even when you go to a food stall on the street, you can just pay by phone. And you should be proud of the fact that this kind of a payment system that we have in India right now does not even exist in the most developed nations also, such as US, etc. In India, this kind of system is much, much more prevalent. That is what happens when the private companies and the government agencies come together. So that is also something that the author here is suggesting. Now, the big question is, everyone knows that yes, the research and development budget should increase. But from where do we get the money? He says that the money can only come from one way, that is to cut the defense budget. He says that yes, India is facing constant threats from multiple borders, but spending more money on defense budget is not the solution to it. He says that the future wars are economic and only more and more investment in science and technology, better understanding of weapons would actually help us win the war and not putting more soldiers on the ground. So that is what his suggestion is, to increase the spending in research and development. Now, going beyond this particular write-up, if you actually notice this, this is a graph from Indian Express which actually shows you the amount of spending in proportion of their GDP when the countries have to spend on research and development. As you can see, South Korea leading the chart, Germany, US, even China actually spending a lot of money as a proportion of their GDP into research and development. Research and development is of various types. It can be about researching and developing new areas to actually counter pollution. It can be about weapons. It can be about how to improve the nutrition in the food, so on and so forth. All of that is a result of how these countries like South Korea, even Israel, have become so advanced because their priorities have been much, much sorted. Now, also, this is not to say that the government has not done anything. There are a few initiatives that you can actually quote when you're writing answers about the government of India's initiatives to give a push to research and development. For example, the new education policy of 2020 suggested the establishment of National Research Foundation. The aim was to fund competitive peer-reviewed grant proposals from universities. So high-end universities where the students have proposals to develop something where they require the government's help or they require finances, they will be held through National Research Foundation. We also have the imprint scheme, under which the government has involved the IITs, IISc, etc. to provide solutions to some of the problems that we are facing in the country. Each of them have been allocated certain problems such as traffic management, sewage management, wastewater, solid waste management, environment, so on and so forth, and they have been asked to come up with the solutions. We also have establishment of Atal Tinkering Labs through Niti Aayog to foster curiosity, creativity, etc. You will see a lot of schools and other institutions have these kind of labs now where the students can go and take up experiments. India is also signatory of the WTO's TRIPS, that is the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, under which we actually ensure, or at least try to ensure, that the intellectual property rights of the inventors are actually protected. These are just some of the initiatives taken by the government of India to boost research and development in the country. The next article that we have is about ethanol blending. Now, ethanol blending is not a new topic. No recent discovery has been made here. The reason, in fact, why this article has been written is because the Prime Minister, in his Independence Day speech, announced that India has achieved the target of blending 10% ethanol with petrol ahead of its schedule. As you know, the government of India has been working towards a E20 policy. The policy is that the government wants to blend 20% ethanol with petrol by 2025. Earlier, the objective was that we will achieve this target by 2030, but now we will do it by 2025. Ethanol blending, as you know, is the method of mixing ethanol with petrol, which will have a lot of impact. First big impact obviously is it will reduce our import bill. Second big impact obviously is that it will not harm the environment as much as pure petrol would. Ethanol, as you know, is an agricultural byproduct, so it will also help the farmers gain a second source of income. Ethanol is mainly obtained by processing of sugar from the sugar cane, also from other sources like the rice husk, maize, etc. Niti Aayog is very optimistic about it. Niti Aayog says that a successful ethanol blending program can save the country $4 billion per annum, which can be utilized in many other better ways. As you know, the government of India has been working to make ethanol from a lot of different sources. The first generation of ethanol was mainly made from sugar cane only, that is molasses. Now, the second generation of ethanol is using materials such as a rice straw, wheat straw, corn cobs, corn stover, baggies, bamboo, woody biomass, so on and so forth. Now, although this is a good part about ethanol blending, there are also debates and concerns about food security. Food security means what if the farmers, after growing their sugarcane, rice, etc., just keep on selling it to companies to convert it into ethanol? Then what will the people eat? What if we have a situation where we don't have enough food to eat and all that food is being diverted to just make ethanol? That is also a big debate that we have. What about the food security? We'll come to that also in just a bit. If you look at nations across the world, many nations are working in this field. India is not the first one. The one example that you can actually quote, the country that has been leading the entire world in this particular area is actually Brazil. In fact, Brazil has actually achieved the target of 27% blending. Brazil, in fact, has certain vehicles that actually run only on ethanol. So, Brazil is by far the world leader in adopting this technology. The other part of the problem is that it is not just about changing fuel. It is also about having the appropriate vehicles, appropriate engines as well have to be made. The automobile industry has been working with the government to ensure that they are compliant with the 20% ethanol limit, but they will also need some time to change their technology. Now, there are some objections to this transition. As I said, one objection is about the food security. What if we divert most of our food grains to making ethanol and not food? The second objection is about the usage of water. Now, most of the ethanol that is still being made in India is out of sugarcane. Sugarcane, as you know, is a big water guzzling crop. It requires a lot of water, meaning that a liter of ethanol from sugar to be made would require 2860 liters of water. So this is still a concern if we are using sugarcane mainly to produce ethanol. The third problem that people have ignored is that yes, ethanol will not emit any carbon dioxide. That is fine. But it still emits nitrous oxide, which is a pollutant in the environment. So yes, carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas will not be emitted, but there will still be some pollution in the form of nitrous oxide. So we still have to find a way out. Now, let me answer at least one of these questions about the food security. How the government of India has been actually trying to curtail these debates is, as per the policy of the government, most of the things that you can use to make bioethanol right now is the one that has expired. So, broken wheat, broken rice, which is not in use now, spoiled potatoes, potatoes that are not in use now. Most of the things that can be used in making bioethanol in India are those which are not fit for consumption. So, Government of India here has actually found out a middle ground. The second part is that India, with the help of the Food Corporation of India, has huge stockpile of the food grains that we have. We have many more times the food grains that we actually require. So the production of rice and wheat in the country is huge, and we are nowhere near a situation where all this will be diverted just to make ethanol and people will not have anything to eat. One other interesting point here is that how do you make ethanol? Now, this is a new kind of technology I wanted to share with you. See, for making ethanol, the main thing that you require is carbon. The question is, from where do you get carbon? Earlier, the carbon was mainly taken from starch. Starch is in the form of grains, in the form of leaves, etc., that you actually consume. Now, the scientists are working towards cellulosic bioethanol, meaning that now they are actually obtaining carbon from cellulose. Cellulose are the fibers, like the bark of the tree, like the branches, which you don't eat anyway. So if the ethanol is made from the starch, that is from the straw, that is from that part of the plant that you don't consume anyway, that is cellulosic bioethanol. This will be the answer to the problem of food security. This will ensure food security because the part of the plant which you actually eat will not be used, rather the other parts such as the straw and the branches will be used. This is the Government of India's biofuel policy of 2018. You can see the target initially was to achieve blending of 20% by 2030. Now it has been preponed and the target now has to be achieved by 2025. This policy is very clear on categorization of biofuels, on how much the government intends to save through the biofuels. The example of Brazil can be easily quoted. They have been growing very well in field of using bioethanol in their vehicles. In 2019, they achieved the blending target of 10.5. Now they have already achieved the target of over 20%. In Brazil, most of their ethanol production actually comes from corn. So the corn production also has increased, as you can see, and this corn production is leading to increased production of ethanol. Because of this, now they don't have to import a lot of petrol from foreign countries, so they're also saving a lot on their precious forex exchange. The next article that we have here is about a news coming in from Gujarat, where 11 convicts that were sentenced to life for the crime of murder and gang rape of 3 women in Gujarat during the 2002 riots, they have been released from the prison. Now, a lot of questions have been asked. How can these people be released from the prison? What is the law behind it? How the law is unfair or fair? This is what we will be discussing. Now, what has happened actually is based on the remission policy of 1992 of Gujarat. Now, before I take you deeper into this article, let me clarify something here. In Indian polity, you all read about the pardoning powers of president and the governor, right? You know that the president can pardon and the governor can also give certain pardons. However, what you don't read in Indian polity is that the state governments also respectively have their policies on remissions, meaning that even the state governments can remit the sentences of the prisoners. Why? Because prison is actually a state subject. Since prison is a state subject, it gives the state governments to make their own policies of how a person can be let go even without serving the entire sentence. Gujarat, for example, had made this policy in 1992. Under the 1992 policy, for example, if the person has spent at least 14 years in the jail, 1-4, after that the person can ask for remission, and if the person's behavior etc. is good, the state government can allow remission. This is the background of the entire story. Now let's go deeper into it. Now what happened was, one of the people who was actually convicted of this crime had gone to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then had asked the state government of Gujarat to consider this matter. Under this policy, the Gujarat government decided that yes, this case is fine and people will be let go of because they have already served over 14 years in the jail and their behavior has been good. Now, the problem that many people are pointing out towards this is that the crime that they committed, that is rape against women, murder, including murder of some children, all that goes against the entire idea of justice in the country. So these kind of crimes, as for many people, should not have been allowed to be actually remitted under this remission policy. Now, let me give you some details of how this remission actually works. As I said, under the Constitution of India, President and the governors have been given the power to pardon, suspend, remit the sentences. However, the state governments also have power of remission because the prison is a state subject. Now, the Criminal Procedure Code of India actually says that when a sentence of life is imposed on a person whose offense can also have death as a sentence, meaning that if let's say you have committed a crime, for that crime the maximum punishment is death. but the judge only gave you life imprisonment. Then you can be released from the jail, but only and only after you have spent at least 14 years in the jail. After 14 years, you can apply for a request for remission and the government will then think about it. Apart from this, you see that every year on important days, on death or birth anniversary of important leaders, people are released from the jail. Like for 76 Independence Day that just passed, the government of India actually released a lot of prisoners, especially women and transgenders above the age of 50 and the male convicts above the age of 60 who were ill, who were well behaved amongst other people. So this is not a new thing that is releasing people from the prison even before they have served their entire sentence. Now, on what grounds can the person be remitted? This has been a matter of big debate. The Supreme Court has said time and time again that the state governments cannot randomly release any person. The Supreme Court in 2000, in a famous case called Lakshman Naskar versus Union of India case, Supreme Court gave 5 guidelines. Number 1, if offense is an individual act of crime and does not affect the entire society, that is, if 1 or 2 people are killed and not the entire society is harmed. Second, whether there is a chance of crime being repeated in the future. Third, whether convict has lost the potentiality to commit the crime. Fourth, whether any purpose is being served in keeping the person in the prison. And fifth, socio-economic condition of the family of the convict. All these grounds have to be considered, only then the state government should actually grant remission as per the Supreme Court. Now, what happened in case of Gujarat specifically is with respect to their remission policy of 1992, which was in force at the time when the crime was committed in 2002. Many people are pointing out that this policy of 1992 of Gujarat government was actually removed by the Supreme Court in 2012. In 2012, the Supreme Court had said that this policy is arbitrary and it should be removed. So the question is, if the Supreme Court had removed this policy and it does not exist now, how can the Gujarat government release these people on the basis of that policy? That is because, as per the Gujarat government, when the crime was committed at that time, the policy was in force, and thus we will go ahead with the 1992 policy only. And that is what has led to all this debate. And that is why there's a debate. There's obviously a chance that we will have a situation where people will go to the court against this. This is called the famous Bilkis Bano case, because she is one of the people who were actually raped in this case. This now remains to be seen, because people are saying that since this policy does not exist now, how can remission be granted under this 1992 policy? These were the important articles that we had from the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number 1. For the next century to be India's stepping stone into the future, the government must increase its spending on research and development. Discuss. Second, what are the key provisions of India's biofuel policy? How does it attempt to tackle the debate between food security and biofuels? Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.